all the engagement sessions. We will also be posting this video online, so people who are unable to attend tonight can manage to hear your ideas and suggestions. Next, while we're conducting this session in English, you can listen and engage in the language of your choice. If you want to hear the audio track in English or French, you can click the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen and select the language channel you want to listen to. You could also opt to not follow a specific channel and just listen to the live feed. If you are speaking, we would encourage you to turn your camera on and ensure that you speak clearly into the microphone so that we can help the translators joining us here today, and so the other participants on this call can hear your eloquent remarks. Now, before we jump into the discussion, I would like to remind everyone that you're encouraged to complete the survey or send a written submission in response to the local governance review team. To do so, just visit gnb.ca/vibrantnb, or you can email the brief to vibrantnbdynamic@gnb.ca. We have a good-sized group here this evening, so I'm going to ask that you use the raised hand feature in Zoom if you want to make a comment or ask a question. That way we can keep things moving along. You can find raise hand either through the participants panel or under the reactions button, which is in the bottom of your menu bar. You can also post questions or comments using the chat function. So this is the final of our 4 public engagement sessions this week. We've also already completed 6 themed stakeholder engagement sessions that brought a good number of individuals and organizations to the table. And once the new municipal governments are sworn in, we will be conducting another 12 regional engagement sessions for a total of 22 at this stage. We have 2 hours allocated for this session, so I'm going to ask everyone to be brief and to try and limit their comments to 2 minutes or less. This will ensure as many people as possible can express their views. If you have a lot to say, we would encourage you to make a written submission to the local governance review team, as previously stated. To ensure we have an open and engaging discussion, we have adopted some rules for respectful dialogue that we'd like to make everybody aware of. All individuals participating in the engagement sessions on local governance reform must abide by the rules for respectful dialogue. Failure to do so may result in participants being asked to leave the session. We have not had to do that this week, and we're going for 4 for 4. So here are the rules. I'll just quickly cover them off. All participants agree to open dialogue without profanity, verbal abuse, and bullying. All participants agree to exchange their thoughts within the time allotted to allow everyone an opportunity to participate. All participants agree to follow instructions from the facilitator. All participants agree to treat opinions and ideas with mutual respect and consideration. And all participants agree to have respect for everyone in the session. Now, housekeeping is all out of the way.
Chad, just before you begin, there might be a translation.
So to kick things off, first thing I'd like to do is just remind everybody and ask everybody to make sure your microphone.
Oh yeah, no, good. I'm just on a call here with
talking. I hear some conversations going in the background, and it's hard for everybody else to hear and participate. And now I would like to invite the Honorable Danielle Savard, Minister of Local Government and Local Governance Reform, to the screen to deliver a few remarks. Minister, the screen is yours.
Chad and Minister, just before we start, can we make sure the translation is working? There are notes in the chat that it's not.
All right, well, let's see what we got here. I have the button working.
The message was from the interpreter.
I'm hearing the French feed right now.
Okay. Very good.
Wait, I think we're good to go. Minister Alain.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you on this lovely spring night, and we have playoffs tonight. So I know that some people will probably leave at 8:25 to support the Montreal Canadiens, so that's good. We have had 3 public engagements sessions this week, and I know that we're going to have another informative discussion tonight. This meeting is about sharing your ideas and your concerns. Public engagement is such an important aspect in this process. In total, we will be holding 22 formal engagement sessions by the end of June, and we've held more than 100 meetings on local governance reform, and that number is increasing on a daily basis. Local governance reform is the process of changing what we have into what we want, what we need, and what we want. Some areas of the province are already having difficulty maintaining services such as fire protection and community centers. I know that we can have an open and frank discussion again tonight. I certainly appreciate you taking part tonight, and I really appreciate your time and your efforts and your discussions and your opinions. This is going to be a great discussion. Also, I want to highlight that Minister Gary Crossman is with us tonight, the MLA from Hampton, and the MLA Keith Chiasson from Tracadie. Shaila is here also. So thank you for to the MLAs for being here. And to all the mayors, councillors, and LSD reps and citizens, thank you, and let's have a great discussion. I'm here now. I'd like to introduce our Deputy Minister of Local Government and Local Governance Reform, Ryan Donnie, to say a few words.
Thank you, Minister, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this sunny Thursday evening. I'm quickly going to go over some of the details of the process for local governance reform. On the screen, you're going to see a high-level timeline that we're following. This information and a more detailed timeline is available on our website at gnb.ca/vibrantnb. We started the reform process in the last fall. We launched our website in January, and in April, we started our second phase of our reform process. It began with the release of the Green Paper, and will end at the end of June once we've finished our 22 public, stakeholder, and regional engagement sessions, as well as the hundreds of survey results that we're getting, as well as position papers and emails that we're receiving on a daily basis. So I thank you for participating tonight, as well as for the formal pieces that we've been receiving. The third phase is going to run through the summer, and it's focused on analyzing all of the information that we're receiving through the engagement process. And this is a lead up to what will be released this fall, which is a white paper. So the Green Paper is about putting ideas forward and having conversations around those ideas and spurring discussion, while the white paper is going to be government's reform plan.
Okay.
We're going to outline the policy decisions made by government related to reform in that white paper this fall. I'll reiterate what the minister said earlier. There are no decisions made. The white paper has not been drafted. Some folks have tried to suggest that, and I can assure you that's not the case. We want to hear from you. We put forward the Green Paper in April in order to get feedback on the opportunities that are in the Green Paper, as well as the fact that it's not an exhaustive list. We know we're going to hear some great things tonight, just as we have for the last 3 nights. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to read it, and if not, it's certainly available on the website, as well as a lot of other information and data and facts with regard to the local governance system. The Green Paper explains issues that need to be addressed through the reform process and provides opportunities on how we can address them. It's intended to encourage that public discussion that we're having here tonight. There are 4 pillars or themes in the Green Paper, and they are the local governance structure, the regional collaboration, land use planning, and finally, the financial system that props all of that up. This evening, we're going to focus on regional collaboration and land use planning. In an earlier conversation on Tuesday, we focused on the current structure and financing. If you have additional ideas or opportunities, I encourage you to share those either by way of email, if you can't get on this evening, or by filling out one of the surveys. The list is not exhaustive, and we're looking for your input and ideas. So not just feedback to what we've put forward, but also there may be things we've missed. Before I hand it back to Chad, I'd like to remind everyone what services are provided provincially or are a provincial responsibility, and what local governments are responsible for. The list on your screen is certainly not exhaustive, and some local governments provide as many as 23 services to their communities. I'll note that in local service districts, the minister is responsible for ensuring the service delivery to residents, like fire, garbage collection, and recycling, for example. I want to thank you very much for taking the time this evening to be with us. I really look forward to the conversation and the ideas that are going to come out of the discussion this evening. And I'm now going to hand it back to Chad to start that process.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ryan. So as we mentioned, tonight's session is going to cover 2 of the 4 pillars presented in the green paper, and we're going to put out 4 questions for discussion. As mentioned at the beginning of the session, we want to ensure as many people as possible have an opportunity to share feedback on these questions. So we'll be asking people to stick to the 2 minutes for their remarks. If there's enough time at the end of each section, we will circle back to people who have additional comments, but be mindful that we've allocated 2 hours for the whole discussion. So here is our first question. Oh, and one more. Remember to use the raise hand feature if you'd like to speak. It's the best way for us to find you. It's under the reactions button that's at the bottom of your screen. Over the years, business and economic groups have told us that we need to increase collaboration between local governments and regions. The Green Paper outlines a few options, including having communities pool their human and financial resources to reduce duplication, strengthening the mandate of regional service commissions, developing service standards and benchmarks and ways to measure them that make sense both locally and are fair no matter where you live within the province. Which of these opportunities are the most important to pursue, and which are the most relevant to you? And then lastly, are there other options that we could also consider? Let's open up the floor for discussion. John Taylor, the floor is yours.
Hi, so I'm just going to keep this pretty brief because what I want to recommend has been pretty well traveled by all the over 25 different reports that have been done over the course of our local governance reform history here. So I've had the great pleasure of being a master's student during all this, studying local governance reform. It was a great coincidence. So I basically spent the last year looking at this. And one thing that really struck me in the Finn report regarding, regional government and local government is that there's no ready-made solution that we can look to. But that was in 2008. And since then, we've added a lot of new things. And I think really the regional district system in British Columbia is a ready-made solution that we can implement with relatively little discomfort, but have some really great gains. So we've got a lot of different elements of our local governance system that can really be brought to the forefront and made to actually see their full potential if we just accept this ready-made solution. So I will just encourage people to look into that for themselves as well. I'm not going to go into the whole thing because it's very well covered. BC has a great website, but yeah, thanks very much. I hope we have a great session.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that. And if there is some information that you can provide, if you've been doing some research on it, I think that'd be great. Make sure you submit that to the department for review. Next, we're going to go to Doug Hamer. Doug, good to see you. Just you're on mute, Doug.
There we go. There. Thanks. My background's in the fire service and a candidate for election. I find out next week whether I get in or get kicked out. The issue of dispatch for fire service, probably not a lot of folks aware of it, and I'm not going to really embody that tonight, other than the issue that's currently going on in New Brunswick is a lot of the volunteer fire departments, which are mentioned 5 times in the green paper about the challenges with HR, and those are accurate. There are some challenges of retaining people, but the issue of dispatch, which I think is very important to getting those people out on the road, there was some negotiations went on amongst a number of the municipalities to dispatch the fire departments. And the solution that was presented to the Lsds and the municipalities was a half-cent increase on the tax rate. Now, to put that into real dollars, that's $27,000 in the case of Salisbury and the surrounding areas. When I did a little bit of research, I found out that in our neighboring jurisdiction in Prince Edward Island, Medavie Blue Cross, which runs ambulance service in all 3 provinces here, is providing that service for $1,200 a year. I use this as an example because is this process all really about a cash cow for the municipalities rather than look at efficiencies of regionalization? We do it here. We have 6 fire departments that have been together for 34 years running mutual aid, and the names on the door really is irrelevant. So I raised that. The minister and I have already spoken about it briefly a couple of months ago, but I think it's an example that a lot of folks in the LSDs and the small villages are terrified of, that their taxes are going to skyrocket to fund municipalities, larger municipalities, maybe in an inappropriate way when there's other more cost-effective ways of doing business.
That's great. Thanks for your input, Doug. Appreciate that. Next, we're going to go to Justin Hatt. Welcome back, Justin.
Thank you. I'm obviously in an LSD as well, and we have had these conversations about regional collaborations. As the ministers know, we're sort of getting a framework together for recreation cost sharing and so on. However, as I have pointed out to the ministers and in the last session we had on Tuesday, that there have been some controversies with that, with the municipalities claiming that they've got these collaborative projects on the go, but they're not willing to have a budget for recreation themselves, and yet they're asking for everyone else to pay for it regardless. There is a really big concern with that, and it was mentioned on the Tuesday meeting that from municipalities that they would like the LSDs to pay for these things. However, LSDs are rarely ever consulted in these projects before they even start. And so why should the LSDs suddenly be told that they have to pay for them if they're not even being consulted in the first place? So that is a really big issue. And especially here in Zone 10, there have been projects like the arena in Blacks Harbor and the arena in St. Stephen, where those municipalities they haven't communicated with the LSDs about these projects. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, we want you to pay for them because you're using them. I think a better approach, if there is a funding issue for those projects, they should have a local rate for their own people and then a general rate otherwise. But demanding LSDs pay for them, I do not think it's fair.
All right. Thank you, Justin. Appreciate it again. Next, we're going to go to Guy Gru. Guy, nice to see you.
Hi, thank you. Good to be back. I think maybe I can put a slightly different perspective on the issue of shared services. And you can't talk about shared services without talking about the equalization grant process that was originally put in place to help those communities that were at an economic disadvantage. And the intent of the equalization grant was honorable, but that grant formula is outdated and very unfair in several aspects. And I've forwarded that information on. But the equalization grant has fostered an atmosphere of bitterness and resentment from those communities that receive no equalization, while neighboring communities receive hundreds of thousands and in some cases millions of dollars in additional funding. And it makes it really difficult, extremely difficult to enter into discussions on shared services when there's a perception that not all communities in a region are being treated fairly. And this is made even worse when communities that receive $0 in equalization are then asked to pay up to 5 times more based on their assessed values for the same shared services. And this is a major impediment. Oh, somebody's jumping in there. Anyway, this is a major impediment to the whole shared services arrangements. And just as an example, Doug Harmer raised the idea about the fire dispatch service. Mm-hmm. In our community, our current cost is $7,000. The cost for the shared services is over $40,000. So what is the incentive for our community to join into a shared services agreement that costs 6.5 times more than what we're currently paying? And that's basically something that has to be fixed if we're going to talk about shared services and regional collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Guy. Before we move to our next speaker, which is Linda Walsh, there was a comment posted in the chat, people asking if you could identify what community or area you're from. If you're feeling comfortable doing that, then please, your fellow contributors would like to hear from you. So Linda, the floor is yours.
Hi, I'm in the parish of St. Patrick, and I'm on the local LSD here. My comment is that I see that there is lots of opportunity for collaboration between all of the LSDs in the various areas, and I see opportunities to strengthen the local service district to help us with that. But I also understand, and I've lived here all my life, there is a major cultural difference between people who live in the more formal municipalities and the people who have chosen a rural lifestyle. So we need to be cautious as we go down this road that we don't end up with the municipalities wielding a very heavy arm towards the LSDs, which are used to a more rural lifestyle and a more laid back lifestyle. We're not as regulated. We don't expect, we don't expect street lights and sidewalks and all those sorts of things. That's not part of the rural lifestyle.
Right. Great. Thank you, Linda. Appreciate that. Next, we're going to go to Sally Mcgrath. Sally, the floor is yours.
Just have to unmute myself. Regional collaboration is a sticky area. We were asked to collaborate in the cost of a rink in Fredericton, which turned out students from our area could not play in because it was only if you were in the A division that you had access. So the provincial boundaries for the hockey associations were written and drawn right up in our LSD. I have listened to the mayors, the individuals who wish to be the mayors of Fredericton, and it was interesting. They mentioned a regional performance center, a regional pool, which would actually have 3 pools they are planning. And I wondered how much use would the people in my area, which is the Nashwauk Valley, get from those? Because certainly we would be expected to pay for them. So that's my issue with regionalization. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sally. Appreciate that. Next, we're going to Elad.
I'm Elad Yarrow. We live in RSC 11 in Gornish. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to regionalization, I think Sally and Justin and Linda have been spot on. We're essentially being asked to pay by municipalities in our area for services that it is not reasonable for us to even expect or access. If I want to go to Odell Park, I used to live in Fredericton. I would go to Odell Park, 5-minute drive, 20-minute walk, reasonable. I have to drive 24 minutes to get to Odell Park. I checked that out on Google Maps the other day. You're asking me to pay for it. And you know what? If I go, I'm happy to pay for it. Charge my user fee, right? I am absolutely 100% for that. I'm not a freeloader. I have certain expectations of my LSD and what services I receive. But things that I can't reasonably access, right? It's like if I went to the minister and said, you know what, I built a greenhouse for you. You're welcome to access it at any time.
Elad, we're having some trouble hearing you.
Sorry. Is this any better?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like if I built a greenhouse. I didn't ask you if you wanted it, Honorable Minister, but please come visit whenever you want. It's going to cost you $500 a month. You didn't ask for it, you didn't want it, but now you need to pay for it, even though you can't really use it. You know, I have a long way from Moncton for you to get to my house. It's just not reasonable. Charge us user fees, have discounts for local people. It makes a lot of sense. I don't have anything against that. But don't ask us to pay wholesale for things that we can't reasonably access.
Very good. Thank you, Elad. Next, we're going to go to Robert Campbell. Robert, the floor is yours.
Hi, Robert Campbell from Salisbury. I think the word collaboration, so Salisbury is surrounded by over 10,000 residents from LSDs. We're a population of about 2,400. It's been growing year over year. Our businesses, though, have thrived from the LSD. So I want to make sure there's a hybrid approach as we look at this. Our business growth during COVID in our community grew by 13%. When we talk about trails, we build our trails because we invite people in from Moncton Riverview to come into our community to discover the beauty. We have volunteers from those LSDs that have collaborated, worked collaboratively with us. We're a community. We're all together. Their kids come to our schools. So there is regional collaboration that's taking place right now. We work well with our LSDs. We consider them part of our Salisbury family. Our neighbor up the road in Petitcodiac today, we share baseball teams, basketball teams, hockey teams. Our parks department drives to Petitcodiac, helps groom their ball fields. They help share some facilities with us. So that's already taking place right now. So I just want to make sure as we go through this, there already is a lot of this taking place. It's not a one size fits all around the province. And I'm going to end it with, I do agree with Danielle Savard, go Habs, go.
Fantastic. Thank you, Robert. And next we're going to go to Lois Corbett.
Sorry, mute button issues. Sorry about that, guys. Minister, thank you very much, and staff for pulling us together. I'm going to swing over to the land issue for my comments, if you don't mind. I was really disappointed in the green paper with respect to environmental protection, mostly because I know it's on your radar and your staff folks' radar, about how collaboration would assist the protection of our so-called natural resources and help keep us out of the muck in the two crises that we face: biodiversity, nature crises, and the climate change crisis. So whether we're talking about flood prevention, adaptation to climate change, bringing down greenhouse gas reduction, working together to protect upstream clean water for downstream communities, this is something that, in all of the polling that we've done at the Conservation Council, unites New Brunswickers, whether they live rural or urban, suburban, or whatever. It is a value set that scores so highly when we're out there in the public that municipal reform needs to give a nod to how working together, collaboration, money, resources, capacity could protect all those things that our rural folks and our so-called urban folks share in common, which is clean air, clean water, better forests, all those great things. So in the next iteration, I fully expect, either from the land use part of that pillar, that we won't just have the minimum basis for kind of good land use planning protection that takes into consideration water, rivers, and streams and drinking water protection, but also adds a modern 2021 level to planning processes that makes these smart people, planners and officials at local government, sit down and say, this one's not a good one.
Great. Thank you, Lois. We're going to have, we've reached time. We're going to have to move on to our next speaker, and that will be Bob Hickman.
Okay, on collaboration, I think there's pros and cons to moving towards a more workable situation with regard to LSDs. But I'm from Dorchester, and again, I mentioned it the other night, and it's worth mentioning again, we're a bit of a enigma because we have to deal with a federal institution, a First Nations, and that in itself adds all kinds of complications to our situation. So when you talk about collaboration, it's not just with LSDs and municipalities. It's a matter of a good working relationship with the federal government when it comes to Corrections Canada and First Nations. And I think it's safe to say that we feel that we're subsidizing in some respects some of the services that we provide to these people, the federal institution and the First Nations. And so anyway, I just...
Jason Gallant, if you could just mute your microphone, we'd appreciate that. Thank you.
So if you don't have if you don't have a professional staff, we have very limited resources when it comes to human resources. So if you're not out there competing and negotiating about generating more revenue for our community and our municipality, you're in a bit of a quandary. Anyway, there's no solution to that. It's just that when we talk about LSDs, I feel that our relationship with our immediate LSDs is a very workable one. The only thing that would scare me is transportation, roads, bridges, and all that kind of good stuff.
Right.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate that. We've got 3 people left in the queue, and we were working for about another 3 minutes. So we'll get through Linda, Brent, and Lee, and then we'll move on to our next question. So Linda, the floor is yours. Just check your microphone, Linda.
There, I have it now. Sorry about that.
That's
I just
okay.
wanted to make a comment about costing. References has been made to the cost of recreational facilities and in municipalities, and having people in the LSDs pay part of the cost of those facilities. In a lot of cases, it's very difficult to even figure out costs. I went to St. Stephen today and swam in the pool. The municipal office is in that facility. There's meeting space in that facility. The one in St. Andrews is even more complex because there's a wellness center, a private club, meeting dining room space for banquets, in addition to the arena, and then there's a not-for-profit has a theater. So even breaking out the costs to understand what are the true costs of, for example, running the arena, or the true costs of running a pool in a complex that has a lot of different functions is difficult.
Very good. Thank you, Linda. Appreciate that. Next, we are going to go to Brent York, and then we'll finish up this section with Lee Reed. Brent, the floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Brent York. I'm also from the LSD in Restigornish. Recently moved here. We moved here with the intention of starting a small hobby farm. So obviously land use things really kind of, they concern us. You know, I don't think I speak just for myself when I say that, you know, if you guys start messing around with things like zoning and bylaws regarding zoning, and those bylaws are under controls of people that aren't really in the community where, you know, where say maybe certain actions like farming are happening, then that has adverse effects on people who are looking to, you know, to grow their own food, for instance, become more self-sustainable, possibly contribute food back to the province, as we've heard, you know, we've heard our premier say we need so very desperately. And then I also second the same concerns with regards to taxes being raised for services that we all know, at least not fully effectively, will be rendered. Like, we don't need to pay for things like street lights, and we don't need to pay for things like city water or municipal water supply or municipal sewer, because we all have wells and septics. When we moved out here, we knew we were going to, right? These are things we agreed to. So I understand that there's difficulty in costing out what things like recreational centers and things actually are, and what, you know, what the expenses of those are, and really, you know, what the fee should be to charge. But the fact of the matter is the people in the LSDs didn't decide to build your rec center. And because of that, you know, as callous as it's going to sound, determining those costs is not our problem, right? We should not be either involved in determining those costs or being put on the table for them when we aren't actually using them, or where the majority of the people in the LSD aren't using them. And if they are, then they should be paying their weight, right? And that's based on people that are using it. Those people should be paying for it.
Very good. Thank you, Brent. Appreciate that. Next, we're going to jump to Lee Reed, who will close out this section of the evening. Lee.
Good evening. I'm personally not opposed to cost sharing with what I would call a local community. Our LSD is in proximity of the village of Plasteroff. But what we need, and I think Linda brought this up a bit, what we need is the community that we're going to be amalgamated with, if that happens, has to open up its books. Because if there are any inefficiencies and bad practices in the way they run the facility, we don't want to subsidize that. I think the other thing with collaboration is that people collaborate when it's to their advantage and when they have a common interest. I'd mentioned in one of the earlier sessions, our C12 is too large, it's too long. If it was put together on the base of population numbers, that's one thing. But when you have a 2.5 hour drive from one end to the other, you can't share much in the way of facilities. They tried it with sports, it didn't work. So I think the further away from local that you move, the less control you have over governance. So I'm in favor of, I guess, the status quo, cost sharing those things which we do benefit from, probably on some sort of a user pay, because we didn't have a say in creating the facility that now we're being asked to fund. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lee. Appreciate that. That was a good discussion for round one. Now we're going to move into the next round. And the last couple speakers did have some conversations about land use. So let's jump into that topic. So another area the Green Paper identifies as an opportunity is the better coordination of land use plans and future development. This could assist in addressing issues like urban sprawl, rural subdivisions, managing industrial development, protecting natural resources, and farms. How would you recommend local governments deal with these types of issues? The floor is open. We'll start with Vernon.
Hi, how are you tonight?
Very well, Vernon.
I like the prospect of the rural areas having a good rural focus when it comes to land use planning. And I think in some regions, they have a better deal than other regions because the rural areas don't have to contend with a tri-municipality, which fights amongst itself and has to put on another hat when they're talking about the commissioners, that is, need to put on another hat when they're talking about rural areas. But you go to another region and naturally it's more rural. And so more of the agenda relates to rural matters. And I think that bodes really well for trying to build support for rural planning processes, whether you're a municipality or in an unincorporated area. So these sort of communities of interests and how you define them, I think are, and draw boundaries are really important. It's a kind of collaboration exercise. It's an opportunity when you're doing a rural planning process to, I think, do better than we have and not say, here's your boundaries, here's your statistics, the number of people there are in your communities. Okay, let's plan. No, give the people doing the planning processes an ownership role. Mm-hmm. What are your boundaries? How do you define your communities? Well, that's how you build ownership in a process. And I've seen many years and many planning processes fall on their heads, but then get rejuvenated by another planner brought from far away, and it seems to magically happen. Right. And nobody really feels like this was their undertaking. And, you know, so it's like you want to be the government so that the government isn't happening to you. Right. And in order to do that, I think the kinds of collaboration have to be more flexible. Why is it that we couldn't contract our planning and advisory services from another, say, rural municipality, right?
Yep. No, that's great. Vernon, we're going to have to move on. Our next speaker is Danielle Savard. Danielle.
Second. Okay, hi. Yeah, well, in regard to land use planning in the province, it's, I think, I mean, we are very often on the idea that what we have right now should be just tweak and everything is going to be good. Well, I'm sorry, I mean, to say it that way, but what we have right now in land use planning, it's the minimum of the minimum in order, I mean, to avoid the horror that can happen in planning. If we want really to bring sustainability in planning, we have to bring new concepts. And there's a concept that has been developed by the province that is called sustainable community design, has been in place for a few years, but the province has given, I'm sorry to say it that way, just lip service. They didn't facilitate the implementation of the concept, and they didn't give a push for the communities to use it and to really implement it. We have also to look at integration of the provincial interest, the regional interest, and the local interest all together. That means regional planning and provincial policies that are linked with where the local communities are going and have these objectives that are going to be met. If they are not, we're wasting our time again. I like, I mean, the fact that there are some people that have noticed that the BC model seems to work. Well, I mean, it seems to work for BC. We have to adapt it to adapt it to our own context here in New Brunswick. But there's a lot of good stuff that has been started over there, and I mean that it could provide good benefits for New Brunswick.
Okay, thank you, Danielle. I appreciate that. Next, we are going to Elad.
Yeah, Tuesday, about freedoms and rural freedoms and zoning, right? And I wanted to expand on that since this is the current topic of discussion. And I actually want to say something positive about the planning folks at RSD 11. When we were looking to buy this place, they were accommodating and responsive, and they were absolutely fantastic. One of the nice things about this area, where we have very flexible zoning and there isn't a very tight plan, is that we can answer the call of the government to start.
Elad, we're having a hard time hearing you. I think that your hand movement might be playing with your microphone a bit.
Let me turn off the camera. Is this any better?
Yeah, we're not hearing you at all now, Elad.
I'll try typing it in.
There we go. We can hear you now.
Okay. So what I'm saying is, I want to say first of all something positive about the planning folks at RC 11. They were responsive and helpful in finding out that had the correct zoning for what we wanted to do. And they deserve kudos for that. There's a lot of unhappiness among a lot of people, and I want to give some praise. And this, by the way, this is indicative of a technical issue of rural internet, right? But getting to the point, when you're looking at planning, regional planning or local planning, you need to talk to the people who are here and who want to be here, right? And accept the realities of living here. And you can't. Am I cutting out again?
You're cutting out again. Yes. Yeah.
All right. So I'll just type it in.
Great. Appreciate that. Thank you, Elad. We're now going to move to Guy Group.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, perfect. I'd just like to highlight that there is a danger when high-level planning becomes prescriptive or mandatory, and it can force communities and rural areas into making bad decisions for the sake of homogeneity. I think there needs to be a recognition that communities across the province are different and that land use planning needs differ from one community to the next. Municipal councils need to have the latitude and the flexibility to deal with specific needs of their community, which is done through their municipal plans and their zoning bylaws. The municipal plan and zoning bylaw, for example, for a tourist community like St. Andrews, where I'm at, with a large national historic district, may be quite different from a community with a large industrial base. Equally, a community that is adjacent to an environmentally sensitive wetland will have a different land use planning need than a community that's located in a dense wooded area. So one size does not fit all, and local differences do matter. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Guy. I appreciate that. Before we move to our next speaker, I would remind everybody that the chat function is a great way if you want to share your views that way. Everything that's captured in the chat tonight will become part of the record. We take a printout of that and we'll include that as we compile the report. So just wanted to throw that out there. And now I'll turn the floor over to Lee, please.
Good evening again. When I look at land use planning, I bring an environmental focus to the planning. And in the last 5 years, I've seen a road built through a wetland, a moose habitat for a high priority government project in Mount Carlton Park, a wilderness park, so that you could drive a snowmobile through. I've seen a campground that, in order to develop little jetties, I guess, canals, so people could bring their boats in, had an excavator out in the river. I've seen a lot of cottage owners along the river, as well as lumber companies, destroying and ignoring the buffer zone along the river. And cottage owners particularly, they wonder why, their bank's washing away after they cut all the alders. So we could have a plan, but if there's no enforcement, it's a useless plan and we wasted our time developing it. Our local department, environment office, I think has got a couple of inspectors. They cover a huge territory. So I don't know why there isn't more enforcement. Is it because they don't have the resources to get around? There's political pressure not to comment on priority projects, but it really, until we have enforcement, a regional plan of any kind isn't going to do us any good.
Okay.
And that's outside of the control of an LSD or a municipality when you have provincial regulations.
Very good. Thank you, Lee. Appreciate that. Next, we're going to go to Tim.
Hello, I'm Tim Borlase from New Brunswick, near Parley Beach. I'd just like to say that I think any local governance reform should be with like-minded communities. I live in an area which has problems with sea level rise, climate change, and I'm part of an advocacy group. And all along the southeast coast of New Brunswick, there are similar groups that oftentimes make recommendations, spend a lot of time preparing reports on land use and development, trying to control development. And yet when provincial forces come to play, often they consult the larger communities in the area, not necessarily the LSDs. So what I'm suggesting that is that if there is to be reform, that something like the large rural regions that were identified in the paper be considered as an option, not necessarily connecting these small LSDs to larger centers, but maybe making a group of LSDs that have like-minded problems as a unit.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate that. And now we're going to move over to Sally Mcgrath again. Your microphone, Sally. Still having an issue there. There should be a mute button down in the bottom right-hand or left-hand corner.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. Land use planning is more than zoning. This province really needs to do land use planning because we're going to be forced to make some changes due to climate change. It absolutely sickens me when I drive down the river, the Nashwater River, and see the floodplain being mined for topsoil that is used to beautify around houses in the municipalities. That has a consequence. It has a consequence not only for taking land out of production for food, it has a consequence for the river and for the fish. And our area is looked upon as a recreation area for people canoeing and fishing. Well, if you want to continue doing that, stop mining our soil. Okay.
Very good. Thank you, Sally. We have about 10 more minutes allocated in time for this section. Is there anyone else that would like to offer a comment? Brian Wilson.
Thank you. I actually wanted to thank not the previous speaker, but the one before that highlighted a really good point about culture. Not necessarily about language or race, but about local culture and how people connect to it. And I really like that idea that there's possibly some potential for a rural municipalities to be formed based around cultural identity, people who moved there for the same reason. And by the way, I'm from St. John, so I have no vested interest in the rural areas. I thought it was an amazing idea. Before I moved to St. John, I had looked at moving out along the ocean, maybe Black's Harbor or Chance Harbor, so I can relate. I've lived in other areas where the rural area was a municipality, about 15,000 people, and it surrounded the municipal urban area that was 4,000 people. Mm-hmm. And they worked very well together. The rural municipal area largely was farming and industrial, while the urban municipal area was services, retail, administration, banking, those kinds of services. So there is potential for some great opportunities there. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be a regional collaboration. And to be honest, I feel like that question maybe is a bit misleading and it gets people too deep in the weeds, because really I feel like a lot of the municipalities and the LSDs need to have some financial security before they ever even talk about regional collaboration. Thinking of St. John, the property taxation is rooted in a legacy decades old. And so the municipalities in New Brunswick aren't able to create separate rates for the different types of properties that exist in their communities. And as a consequence, the recovery of costs for the existence of a commercial or industrial entity is not really there. If you think about St. John, you've got a natural gas power plant, you have Coulson Cove power plant, Point Lepreau power plant just outside the city boundary.
Right.
The city of St. John has a specialized crew that has a training simulator that's used to support Point Lepreau in case of emergency. The oil refinery. So these are critical pieces of infrastructure that support the entire province. Mm-hmm. And so I think each community needs to be able to have a modernized taxation system that feeds their revenue system that accounts for what they do in their community.
Great. Thank you, Brian. We're going to move on to Michael Tower next.
Thank you very much. I'm from Sackville.
I agree with the province has to get involved with land use, but not when it comes to municipalities. A lot of us are set up and we're following a good guidance, and we're watching, we're in one of the areas where we have also the rising waters and floodplains. Climate change is affecting us, and we've been working very well addressing these issues. But it's the outskirts, the LSDs, that if someone wants to go in and do something, unless the province is controlling the land use, it could have a detrimental effect on our municipality and, of course, the LSDs. So I think that's where the focus should be when it comes to land use, and leave the municipalities to keep control of what they're doing. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Michael, now we're going to go to Bob Hickman.
No one through our conversation today has mentioned dangerous and unsightly premises. I guess that I consider that falling into the land use and planning category. Our small municipality finally, out of frustration, hired its own bylaw enforcement officers to police dangerous and unsightly premises in our community. But it's prevalent not only in our community but throughout LSDs and elsewhere. We've been waiting for government to put some teeth in process to help us clean up areas and what have you. And I hope that it's high on somebody's priority list as part of the planning process, because it's certainly been an aggravation for us. I guess that's all I want to mention about it.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. We've got two speakers left in the queue, and that'll wrap up this segment. First, we're going to go to Mike Blaney.
Thank you, Chad. To expand on not the previous, but just before him, Speaker Michael Tower, absolutely, with respect to LSDs, I think it's important that there be great consideration given to land usage and planning. Currently, the LSDs do not have the legislative authority under the current system to really make decisions or provide guidance around land usage. That's in the hands of the manager and ultimately the minister of the department. I think that to me, is rationalizing a desire to move forward with local government reform in order to provide them a situation where they have that authority under the legislation to have greater input. The other thing that I'll mention in my last comment here is that we're all connected within the province of New Brunswick. We cannot simply assume that if we stay with the status quo within our bubble, whether it's an LSD or a particular municipality, that things will be fine. If something starts to go awry or starts to fail in one particular area, it will eventually impact the rest of the province. So we have to understand that we're in this together. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. Next, we're going to go to Janessa Smith, and then we have John Goodfellow in the queue, and then we'll be moving on to the next question. So Janessa, please tap the floor.
Hi. My name is Patricia Williams. I'm a neighbor of Janessa's. So.
We're both on.
Yeah,
together.
we're both here. And when you talk about land use planning, I have a little bit of an issue. A few years ago, there was an asphalt plant. Actually, we're in the Coverdale LSD. We live out in Pine Glen, just outside of Riverview. And someone was building an asphalt plant out here. It was supposed to go on the Niagara Road, but the people who live down there didn't want it near their homes. So actually, the chair of the LSD she lives down there and she didn't want it by her house because of the smell and everything. And that's fine. I completely understand that. So the citizens down there got together and they actually had it moved. Well, guess what? It's out by my house now. And the government gave them the land. It's on Crown land. And nobody out here was consulted about that. Nobody out here was consulted. So one day I was outside and I'm smelling this smell and I'm thinking, oh my God. And I'm panicking because I'm thinking, is my oil tank leaking? And I'm like looking at my tank and I'm going along the hose of it and I'm thinking, oh my God. And then I realized it's the smell from the asphalt plant.
Right.
And Janessa and I sat on my front step here one day, and the trucks that went by, we timed them. Every 30 seconds, there was a truck going by. So yeah, we definitely need to have some planning. But the people who live in the area definitely need to be consulted when that happens.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate that. Now we have one more speaker before we wrap up this block. And we're going to go to John Goodfellow.
Where do I speak? I'll speak right there. Hello, I'm John Goodfellow here. I live in rural Miramichi, and I have a concern. Most people that own a piece of ground in the rural sector feel they have property rights. From anything I can find out officially, those rights are in fact guaranteed by the Constitution of Canada. They're supported by the Supreme Court. I have not yet seen one mention of property rights. I think a lot of the freedoms that we enjoy in the rural sector and why people like to be in the rural sector, maybe the underlying foundation is property rights. Where do private property rights end, and where do we get the community property rights is what I'm listening to tonight. I'm not aware there's anything in the Canadian Constitution that defines community rights. Private rights denies us the right to destroy somebody else's living conditions, including the groundwater, et cetera, et cetera. What happened to our property rights? And how can you have a city nearby or an urban center? Do you really think they should have much to say about how you manage your piece of ground? Right now, I'm dithering as to where I put my garden and whether I want to clear a piece of ground and so on. Is there a conflict of interest here? Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, John. I appreciate you taking the time. We are going to move on to the next question. So I'm going to move into, well, I guess we had one more person raise their hand. We'll see if we can squeeze it in. Vernon, if you're quick, we can get you
in. Sorry, Chad.
Okay.
I really appreciated your thoughts, John. And unfortunately, we're in the situation where there is no constitutional basis for local government in Canada. And the provinces have, as creatures of the province, the right to communicate and deal with communities the way they see fit. Unfortunately, New Brunswick's approach has been considerably less encouraging, or shall we say, empowering than other provinces. So I'd really love it if that were to change. There have been attempts to make a constitutional basis for local government. They didn't make big strides, unfortunately, but it is a thought that's on some people's minds. Where do we go for help if we feel our province is denying us the ability to take the reins?
Very good. Thank you, Vernon. So we're now going to move on to our third block. We're going to aim to be on this until about 8 p.m. So we've got about 20 minutes to discuss this one. There's always demand to fund more infrastructure, and not just at the local level, but when it comes to recreation, there are a lot of resources, facilities, and activities that span borders and that more than one community could use. Sometimes communities have pushed for things like new rinks because their neighboring community got one. We've seen some communities come up with regional master plans for shared infrastructure, but not all have taken that approach. So when we think about this, how could we be better at intercommunity and regional collaboration? And could we use regional service commissions to strengthen collaboration within regions? The floor is open. Justin.
Thank you. As I mentioned before with Zone 10, we have arenas in the village of Blacks Harbor and the town of St. Stephen. And the RSC 10 just developed a sort of draft plan for a regional cost sharing model. However, as I mentioned, the village of Blacks Harbor admitted quite publicly through social media that they did not have a budget for recreation themselves from November. And here it is now May, and they are looking at a new, elected group of officials, and there was no planned budget. They have mentioned this is a collaborative project, but I haven't heard any Lsds in the zone mentioning that. And our RSC 10 does include 2 counties in York, which are a considerably far distance away from Blacks Harbor. So when it comes to the idea of collaboration, it sounds good on paper, but there needs to be a lot of accountability held on those municipalities to make sure that they have budgets themselves for recreation and that they're not just demanding money from everyone else. At the end of the day, it really needs to be something that the consultations with all of the people around have to happen before something is designed and put in place. Otherwise, LSD should not be expected at all to pay for something that's a municipality has just because they wanted it.
Very good. Thank you, Justin. Appreciate you taking the time again. Next, we're going to go to Guy.
Well, thank you. I have 2 points here. First one is collaboration between municipal councils and regional service commissions is key to the success of any shared service arrangements. Currently, there's a disconnect between the two bodies that are in power. Like the powers of a municipality are vested in its council, whereas the powers of the regional service commission are vested in a board of mayors that are not accountable in any way to the municipal councils. Fortunately, this can be easily addressed by enabling municipal councils to appoint a representative to the regional service commission board instead of just arbitrarily appointing the mayor. And this is done in British Columbia and has worked out well in that province. The second point I wanted to raise is when you speak of regional collaboration and in terms especially of recreational facilities, there's a tendency for these recreational facilities to be located in populated areas, which equates to municipalities. And I'm not sure how you address that. I know in our RSCs, I don't expect that we would build an arena near the garbage dump in the middle of the Lsds, but I think there's a built-in bias there that needs to be somehow addressed when we talk about shared services, because obviously many of the people at the table here will view this as municipalities doing a cash grab to fund their infrastructure that's located in their municipalities, when that may not be the case. So I don't know how we get around that challenge. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Guy. Next, we're going to go to Linda Walsh. Linda.
Hello again. We can't undo what has happened in the past. Municipalities have rinks and different infrastructure that they built and we weren't consulted. We can't change any of that, but what we can do is agree that going forward as a larger region, we can find a way, we can find a path to work collaboratively. I see that the LSDs, I feel that we can unite and work collaboratively, and the recent process with the Eastern Charlotte Recreation Committee to try to resolve some of their issues, I can see that is the beginning of solving the issue in their area. And I agree that on the LSD side, that the Regional Service Commission can play a role and be part of our voice and bringing everyone together and to the table as we solve recreation issues for our communities. And, you know, in the same, you think about school, we all pay taxes that fund our schools, but many of us don't have children in school anymore, but it's still part of the need, and ensuring that we have resources that we can all take advantage of is important, but it has to be a discussion and collaboratively achieved, and not just someone deciding that everyone's going to pay a certain amount.
Right. Great. Thank you, Linda. Next, we're going to go to Giselle Fontaine. Giselle posted in the chat that she was having trouble with the hand raise function, so I'm just going to invite her to come to the floor.
Thank you very much. Yes, I just wanted to add that I'm in the Kent Regional Commission here. I live in St. Louis, which is right next to the Cushawawak National Park. And we have just, yes, built in collaboration with the Lsds and the village of St. Louis, the town of Rishabakto, and the village of Rexton, the new Kent North Center. So it's on all of our tax base. It's been agreed on. Not everybody was in agreement, the residents, okay? The board was, okay? So between St. Louis, Rishabakto, and Rexton, we have an arena, a new one, which also has a gym and an indoor walking track and facilities that people can rent. We have a pool, and we also have a curling rink. But our idea here is to try to get everybody to participate, to promote our region here, to have more people coming in, because we want to keep what we have here. So it seems to be working here for us. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Giselle. Appreciate you sharing. Next, we're going to go to Danielle Savard.
My goodness, went fast. Okay. What I know, people have mentioned a lot about regional planning and collaboration, but if we're going to be involved with that in province, especially because right now we don't have regional plans. Basically they're trying to bring it, but if we want to have that, we have to have also the conflict resolution that is going to be linked to it. In BC, it's exactly what they're trying to do, and if it's not well explained how it's going to work when people are going to fight, because people will fight eventually, it's not going to work properly. In the past, in the province, we had regional planning that was in the old Planning Act of 1972, and it didn't work. So there was no regional plan. So we have to handle that situation really well if we really want to have success with regional planning, and link it to the local objectives and the provincial policies.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. Just want to point out there's some really great discussions happening on the chat feature. If you haven't had an opportunity to peruse, it's certainly good. As I mentioned, we are going to be capturing that and bringing it forward into the final report that we send into government. We've got about 10 minutes or so left on this topic. We're talking about better intercommunity and regional collaboration. And could the regional service commissions be used to strengthen collaboration within the regions? Vernon.
Of course they could. And excuse me if I have to swallow a piece of pork chop. But I think this might be a good opportunity to raise the kind of language. I mean, Regional Service Commission makes perfectly good linguistic sense. Sometimes the language doesn't make a lot of sense. And so what I'm thinking about is the service-oriented approach to local government. What we see in the difference in language when you go to Nova Scotia is you have, well, the equivalent to our service New Brunswick is access Nova Scotia. So in that language, it sets the tone a little bit, I think. And so Mr. Savard's sustainable community design is also known more generally as conservation subdivision. And I think it's catchy, that the sustainable community design model. But how about rural community? What are we talking about there? Do you mean the rural community under the Planning Act? Or do you mean a community that is rural? What's with this language?
Very good. Thank you for that. Appreciate it, Vernon. Next, we're going to move on to Robert Campbell.
I think Giselle hit it bang on that, collaboration could take place. Sure, the service commissions could help, but when we look at Petitcodiac Salisbury, Petitcodiac has an arena. We certainly don't need to duplicate that. Our kids share facilities together. We have a private gym facility here as well that the Petitcodiac kids come to. We share ball fields back and forth between each other. It can happen holistically without being forced to do so. Again, getting back into that sense of community regionalization. But again, I think we really need to look at this province in the different areas, zero in on where the collaboration is not taking place, and then look at that. Collaboration is taking place here. We don't spend money irresponsibly. We actually look for ways that we can work together collaboratively. So I just want to make sure that we're not trying to make a one-size-fits-all. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Robert. We're moving next to John Taylor.
Hi, I really liked what Vernon said about the language that we're using. And I mean, for the last 60 years, New Brunswick has been very service oriented and not very representation oriented. And you do see that in the LSDs and in the RSCs, where you do have regional directors from LSDs who aren't elected. They're coming from the local advisory councils, and that's great, but they don't actually have any powers. And so I know this isn't explicitly the question. The question is how we can do it, but I think having people be actually elected is a really important part of legitimizing these structures. The other thing is actually supporting the regional bodies in what they're trying to do. That's something the province has to do. In Quebec, you see a lot of, I can't remember what they're called in English, but they're basically like county municipalities. And part of their success is the fact that the province really got behind them and gave them money to make sure things actually worked out. Same thing happened in BC, same thing happened in Ontario to a certain extent. Here, when we actually made our regional service commissions, one of the first things that happened is EMO did not actually, it didn't work out. Initially, that was supposed to be a function that these platforms were supposed to fulfill, except they weren't getting any funding to do it. And so what actually happened is that these separate structures were set up over the same boundary lines, but it's not the RSCs actually doing it. Same thing with regional planning. Ostensibly, this is a mandatory function. I know of no RSC that actually does this. But if you look at the 2017 McKendy report, everybody seems to want to do regional planning. It seems like a great idea, but nobody knows how. And that's because nobody really knows what it is, and nobody's paying for training. Nobody's paying to actually make sure these things happen. And so I see in the green paper, there's a lot of recommendations about other things that regional districts can do. And I think that's great, but we have to support them and prove to the municipalities and the LSDs that are participating that these structures can actually work. And so before we go adding mandatory services, let's help actually make these structures do what they're supposed to do. So yeah, thanks very much.
Fantastic. Thanks, John. Appreciate that. We're going to move to Justin Hatt next.
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick point, because you brought up the RSCs and getting them more involved with this. One of the things that really needs to be considered, especially where LSDs need to be in the consultation process, and especially where the province did say in the green paper it wants every community to be more involved, is basically that the RSCs, and I'm sort of just repeating myself at this point, is to say that the LSDs need to be represented on the RSC boards. Again, Zone 10 is 64% LSDs, 36% municipalities. There's 8 municipalities, one of which only has 300 people in it. but all 8 municipalities are given automatic places on the board for the RSC, whereas of the 21 LSDs that we have, only 9 of them are allowed to be on the board, and yet they're the overwhelming majority in this zone. So the LSDs are not being fairly represented under the current RSC models. And we need to fundamentally go back and revisit whether or not the current structures make any sense and how to develop them so that we can encourage all of the LSDs to have a seat on the board.
Great. Thank you, Justin. Appreciate that. Now we're going to go to Guy Group.
Thank you. I just like to make a very quick comment is that I think that regional collaboration is a very positive force. But where there needs to be a sound business case and a demonstrated, you need to demonstrate that there is a positive benefit. And I think that regional collaboration works best when it's done on a voluntary basis, when you can produce that business case and show that there's a positive benefit. And I just wanted to sort of add in there, I personally don't think that a 4th level of government is the solution. And I don't know if that's where we're headed, is to establish a 4th level of government at the regional level. But I certainly would shudder if that's the case.
Very good.
We already have a lot of government.
I agree with that.
Very good. Thank you, Guy.
I'm glad to hear that.
We've got about 5 minutes left for this segment, and we have 3 people in the queue. So we will work through the 3 people that are left, and we're going to start with Gregory Grant.
Just unmute here. Thank you very much. We all seem to be dancing around the same stump. It's kind of interesting to see what we're all doing here. The start of this conversation with a promotion for the Montreal Canadiens. I mean, really. Okay. I got a bit of coffee on Toronto. I just have to say that, Minister Allen. Having said that, as I'm in the local service district of Canterbury in RSC 12, we have a lot of people here who don't have a lot of people pulling for them. They don't have a lot of access to a lot of things. And there's a lot of people in LSDs, just like ours, who need championing by people who need to champion them, that, champion people that can't champion themselves. So having said that, is RSC the answer? No. No, it isn't. Is another type of RSC, like maybe a rural service area or a region where we can put some LSDs together, like 230 some LSDs is too much. I get that. I would have to drive Minister Allen crazy. He would be our mayor. That's a lot of people to be mayor over. But yeah, we have to have elected representation in a select area. RSC 12, I've heard people say, people from the north, we don't know what's interesting or what's needed in the south. We need to break us up into maybe smaller, 50, 60, 40, I don't know the number, but we have to represent the people in our area, and we have to have elected representation where we can stand up and be counted and be accountable for what we're accountable for, and the decisions that we make, and represent the people that we need to represent, and be voted out if we don't represent them right. Without that, we don't have a chance of making everybody get along in this. And September, October for a white paper, that is just too early. That's too early. We've got to get together on this green paper and be just a little bit more, just plan it just a little bit better to make this election, make an election work.
Very good. Thank you, Gregory. Appreciate you taking the time. We're going to go to S. Cassidy and then to John Goodfellow, and then we're going to move on to our last block.
Yes, good evening. It's Susan Cassidy, and I'm the current mayor of the rural community of Hanwell. And my experience, I've had the experience of being on the LSD committees, and as well as going through the process to become a rural community and following that. I've been listening to people say that the LSDs need to be represented more on the board of the RFCs. And I just want to point out that I feel that most of the groups are well represented with the LSDs and the numbers because it's done on a population prorated type formula that they gather this. I mean, I'm not involved in making the decisions of how many are on it, but there is a formula for that. And I mean, as you can see in RSC 11, where I am, City of Fredericton has 1 seat. They have 55,000 or 60,000 people. The rural community of Hanwell has 5,000. So then you have the village of Harvey. Well, no, I don't want to use Harvey because they're not in ours. Village of Tracy, and they have less than 1,000. So the LSDs that would have maybe 400, they might have 1,000, they might have 600. So they think that if they have 600 individuals as the region, they should have the same vote as the city of Fredericton with 55,000. So that argument, they have to work on that, and they have to educate all of the individuals on how that is done to have the proper representation. Because I do believe that there is a role for the RFC, the commissions, in helping with regional collaboration. Because there are areas where we can collaborate and work together, whether it's like even if we're doing it now on our solid waste. We do it for a number of different products, and recreation is one of those ones that comes up a lot. And we've been in Hanwell participants in a pay-as-you-use model, and as well, we're also in the regional, we have a recreation service agreement with the city of Fredericton. So all of those things are available, and they work at that regional level. So it's just a matter of ensuring that people get the information they need. And it's hard when you have the LSDs where you don't even know how to reach the residents.
Right.
Because they don't have a central contact. I mean, we have
Understand. Susan, we're going to have to move on. So I'm going to jump over to John Goodfellow.
Hello. Rural LSD of Sylvester and Miramichi. I want to put in a plug for fee-for-service. In an LSD, we find the needs are not only different because we live in the rural, we already have natural recreation. On top of that, the needs vary on the age profile of the LSD. And as the population ages, we want different things. People with families want different recreation than people without them. People with families want something that's close, available. They can go out for an hour and skate or swim or whatever they want to do. Doesn't have to be a fancy facility. As the kids get older, maybe they want to play hockey, maybe they don't. If people get elderly, as a lot of people in LSDs are, we really would like to somebody would subsidize our side-by-side, maybe a two-month vacation down south in February and March or something of that nature. So a fee for service, we believe in paying for what we get, but it's really hard to say, well, we're all going to pay so much. Some of us don't want anything.
Right.
And we have different needs. So one size does not fit all.
Very good. Thank you, John. Appreciate that. We are now going to move into our final block. Some areas in the province are having trouble dealing with challenges like urban sprawl, rural subdivisions just outside municipal boundaries. Other areas are juggling issues like industrial development and protecting natural resources and farms. It's clear that improving coordination between land use plans and future development has a crucial role to play in everything from transportation issues and even recreation facility choices, as well as environmental impacts. In what practical ways could we improve coordination between land use plans and future development to address these issues? The floor is open. Danielle.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. I believe strongly in integrated planning. And if you want me to really solve these type of issues, you don't solve just one social issue or just one economical issue or just one environmental issue. Each one of them, when you touch one, it has an impact on all the rest. So the approach has to be more integrated, and you have to have approaches that or offer tools to planners to help the communities. If the planners are not able to articulate the vision for a community, you bet me that the community is going to have a hard time to figure out how they're going to do it. So the planners, have to know all the tools that are available around the world, especially here in North America. We have a lot of very smart planners in North America, and these people have interesting tools. Some of them were never used in this province ever. And because they were never used, people say, oh, they won't work because they come from Chicago or they come from California. It's not true. It's just a problem that we have of thinking that because it comes from away, it's no good. We have to adapt it to our own context, of course, but there's a possibility of doing it. And right now, we have that sustainable community design approach that we don't use. And it was developed for the province, goodness. I'm sorry, I'm getting kind of frustrated sometimes.
That's okay. That's okay. Talking about it gets it out. That's important. Brian Wilson, you're next up.
Thank you. Some things come to mind. Many communities in Canada have the ability to set separate property tax rates. I think they typically use a residential, commercial, industrial rates, and they use it as a cost recovery system. New Brunswick is still operating in a legacy system, and some of the recommendations from the 60s and 70s have not yet been implemented, but those could be some low-hanging fruit that have significant benefits for communities, but also some significant challenges in implementation as well. Also, form-based code could help communities better be able to communicate with developers as to the desire of what communities are looking for, that developers, when they enter into the community, know what's expected, rather than it being a bit of a tennis game to try to figure out who is trying to come up with what idea and how are they trying to leverage those ideas. Also, in terms of the environment, one of the speakers earlier mentioned mining the soil nearby. I don't know if there's an opportunity for communities to be able to be part of environmental enforcement. Folks may have heard of AIM within the Port of St. John that's had some press recently. And I'm not sure how it happens, but municipalities, communities having some greater agency, some teeth over what happens environmental in their communities.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Well, the person that talked about mining soil is up next. Sally. Oh, your microphone, Sally.
Okay, now?
We can hear you.
Okay. Seems to me there's two conflicting reasons for people moving into LSDs. First off, there are those who want to farm or want to just grow their own food and live a rural kind of life. But then there are those who want to escape the tax consequences of living in municipalities, which raises the question of the whole issue of property taxes in municipalities. Why are people wanting to get outside and just live over that line, that boundary, because they cannot afford the taxes in municipalities? So there needs to be some way of looking at that issue. Okay.
That's great. Thank you, Sally. Appreciate that. Next, we're going to go to Justin.
Yeah, I was sort of following on that, just as an example for here, the town of St. George, a lot of people seem to think that we have our own selection of businesses like Tim Hortons Home Hardware and Subway, yet all of those are in the Fundy Bay LSD because that area is part of Upper Latang, which is not in the St. George town boundary. I mean, we even have the St. George Catholic Cemetery. It's ours. So the town boundaries are where they have been. And we all know that the town of St. George would love to have control over that area. Mm-hmm. However, there is quite an issue there because one, our taxes would almost certainly go up because we don't have those businesses within our area. So the tax base changes. But two, we would now be landlocked because it's water on three sides of us, and it's the town of, it would then just be the town of St. George above us. So it would be completely closed in. So there is sort of a dynamic there that is quite a bit of a problem. But another issue, very important, is why those businesses chose to go just outside the St. George town limit. Mm-hmm. And there were valid reasons for not wanting to be in the municipal structure because of the challenges there. Also, you're just off the highway, so you got an added benefit there as well. So the idea when we're talking about these subdivisions, and we need to go back to the question that the previous presenter brought up, is, you know, we need to fundamentally look at what are the reasons for people going just outside those boundaries and actually try to make better sense of why the municipalities are driving people out rather than in.
Great. Thank you, Justin. Appreciate that. Next, we're going to transition over to Guy Gru.
Thank you. I think that, as I mentioned earlier, local differences in planning matter. And our community, we recently transitioned. We had a regional planning advisory committee. We just recently, we're in the process now of transitioning to a local planning advisory committee because that's what our residents wanted. They wanted people that understood and knew the local community to make those planning decisions. As far as helping to fund municipalities, there's two big things I would recommend that could happen right now is stop taxing municipalities for the property that's owned by the municipality. This is just simply wrong. Is the savings from those eliminating those taxes on municipalities could be used to deliver municipal services to the residents. Mm-hmm. The second recommendation I would make is that the province should transfer vacant provincially owned land within a municipality to the municipalities so that these properties can be developed to their highest and best use. This would generate additional revenue for the municipal governments. It would alleviate some of our housing shortages, and it would promote growth. So those are just a couple of things that could be done. Mm-hmm. And if you indulge me, the next recommendation I would allow is allow municipalities to set separate property tax rates for non-residential properties. Like right now, there's no valid reason why non-residential properties, the tax rate is tied to the residential rate. And there's no reason why different non-residential uses could be taxed at different rates. So you could charge a restaurant a different rate than a hotel, a different rate than an industrial facility. Mm-hmm. And that's another avenue where you can get additional revenues to pay for all these municipal infrastructure services. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Guy. Appreciate that. Again, just a reminder that there's good discussions, and I see a few documents that are starting to show up in the chat feed. So make sure to scroll through and check those out. We will make sure that they are captured on our end and included into the report. So we're talking about better ways to improve coordination between land use plans and future development and how we address these issues. We've had some good subjects here or good comments here so far. Are there others that would like to make a comment? I know we have a number of people that have chimed in on the phone. Sometimes it's hard for us to see if you wanted to raise your hand because you're not physically here. Anybody on the phone that would like to make a comment? I see a number that just popped up. Caller, you're on the air. All right. Doesn't appear we have any takers. Anyone else that would like to make a comment about land use plans and future development? Guy.
Thank you. And it's more of a general comment since nobody's talking right now. I find that this forum has been very, very useful. I think that perhaps consideration might be given to having some additional forums. I've participated in both the French language and the English language ones. And I noticed that with the French language, they had a fewer number of participants. So you had a much fuller dialogue and people were given a bit more of an opportunity to speak. So I don't know if perhaps maybe an additional number of English language presentations might be useful down the road, because you've had almost double the number during the English language presentations and the same time allocated for all of them. So just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Guy. Thank you for that.
Guy, it's definitely in the works, and we have talked about it as a team, and it's actually a good medium to in this pandemic, and we can definitely talk about local governance reform. So I think this has been a success this week, so stay tuned.
All right. Thank you, Minister. Next, we're going to jump to Justin Hatt and then follow that up with John Taylor. Justin.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a general comment. Really not with the last question, but with the process. Like, I do agree that, it's been quite informative to hear from everyone. But I do feel also that there have been some fundamental questions that have been raised, some rather fundamental questions regarding what our current structures are, what defines a municipality, what are the differences between a rural community, a village, a town, a city, and even a metropolis. Because I remember filling out an income tax form in 2020 and it said St. John and Moncton were metropolises, but Fredericton was not, oddly enough. So it was just all sorts of weird, there's all sorts of weird definitions going on out there. And there's all sorts of questions about how the RSCs are structured, about about giving LSDs fairness in being represented, and I think this process, I can understand the timeline that the government has, but I do feel that these fundamental questions that have come up probably are going to create a reasonable delay in the process that the government should be prepared to expect.
Great. Thank you, Justin. Going to go to John Taylor.
And there's just something else I wanted to mention. I can't remember if someone else mentioned this earlier, so if I'm stepping on any toes, I apologize. But it's worth thinking about how we might integrate First Nations communities into our regional, platforms, whatever they may be. Of course, these are very different entities than local governments. We don't have the same provincial authority, but it would be nice to think about how we could offer these opportunities for regional integration to all the communities of New Brunswick, not just the ones that are creatures of the province. So it's worth bearing that in mind.
Appreciate that. I'm going to go to Danielle Savard next, and then I'm going to call out a phone number who keeps showing up on my screen here. So Danielle, we'll go to you first.
Thank you. This is a suggestion for the province because it seems that there are several people that are mentioning about sprawl and how we can do it. And there's a lot of confusion and people are not always aware of what are the possibilities. And I'm just suggesting to the province, why not me to have some information sessions that are provided. And I remember, when I was working for the province a few years ago, that there were something like that, but it seems that it's not there anymore. And sustainability, and if we wanted to bring something new and innovations, you bet that we have to present what they are and help, at least, people in New Brunswick to have basic information, how it works. And that would be helpful. So.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate that again. So I'd like to invite, all I have is a phone number to go on, but it's 506-261-6009. If that's you.
Hello, Minister. How you doing?
Oh, you put me way above my pay grade. I'm just the moderator, but I appreciate that. But floor is yours.
Forced regions, I don't think are the way to go, or forced integration into from LSDs are the way to go. Many people are unaware that there's anything even going on now. So what is going to happen? Are people going to have a choice? So if there are LSDs outlying that overall the people are happy, how is that going to come into play with the plan from the government?
Great. We'll certainly take that in. I'm going to jump over to Michael Tower next. Michael?
Yeah, I'm coming. My tablet didn't want to react to me. Yeah, it's back to the land use. I think the government has to protect the municipalities from having companies move into LSDs to avoid paying the taxes and also the regulations, which are set up to protect the environment and at the same time protect the LSDs from having somebody go in and set up something that really shouldn't be put in that area. And since some LSDs don't have an elected voice, they need protection so that certain things don't happen. We have an LSD close to us that had to deal with something, and they had no elected voice that could speak directly to the government. So they ended up talking to the MLA of the area and trying to get help from our municipality, which we gave them what we could. So I think the government has to watch that very closely. And when it comes to these meetings, which I think have been very good, probably the best I've seen since this Finn report came out, that the government is really listening. And with Daniel, I know him personally, and I trust him, and I respect the man. So I think he's doing a great job at this. And I think just a little fine tuning would be to narrow it down and have certain zones meet, so that if you talk about the Dorchester Sackville area or the super Sackville, as Finn report tries to talk about, to have a meeting with everybody in that area to get a fine-tuned point of view from these people, then you'll be able to really get a good grasp on the people's thoughts and be able to relate to them and get better acceptance. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. We've got about 4 minutes left for this segment and 3 people in the queue. So I'm going to ask everybody to be brief, and we're going to start with Robert Campbell.
Just to echo that, I think the process has been going great, but I do want to point out I've talked to 522 people in my municipality. Of that, 70% are not aware of what's going on. Unfortunately, they have not read the green paper. When we've discussed it with them, they're shocked. So we've done a good job, but we've not done a good enough job. I do believe that more consultation is required. I do believe as we get to 75% of people vaccinated, I do believe a follow-up step. It's been a great process, but let's write the white paper and then let's talk to the people in public consultations face-to-face and allow the true dialogue. And I think we can really come to a consensus, but this is not the methodology for all people, unfortunately. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Appreciate that. Next, we're going to go to Vernon quickly.
Thanks. I thought to mention, if I could, that it seems to me that the principal finding of the Jean-Guy Finn report was not the creation of the regional service commissions, but the restoration of across the board local government structure. That seems to be a missing part in the green paper, to claim that it was number one to create regional service commissions. Anyhow, I have a question. I don't know if there's time to answer it. Maybe there'll be time after this meeting. In a meeting I put a link to on the chat section, and that is, what is a stakeholder and what is a citizen, in this discussion? What is the difference between stakeholders? Is it people in local government currently, and then just the rest of us? I'm not sure. I'm curious to know if anyone can weigh in on that for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Vernon. We'll move to Lee next, and then we'll move towards wrapping up the session. Lee.
Okay, I'd just like to, it's a bit off topic, but just to address this this perception of a democratic deficit in local service districts. On the 1st of June, I'll start my third tour on an advisory board. They're as democratic as the way they elect people in Vermont. A notice is sent out. Those that are interested show up, and people are nominated and elected. Those LSDs that don't have any pressing issues don't show up. So just because there isn't an elected advisory board, you shouldn't assume that they're unhappy with the status quo. They are happy with the status quo. The peasants only get their pitchforks and rise up to storm the Bastille when they think they're being hard done by. So I don't think there's a democratic deficit. The last go around, not this recent election for LSD advisory boards, we were told that would be the last time we would gather in the curling club, and the small number of people that did show up, that would be the last time. But this last round of elections, our expectation was it would be run by Elections New-Brunswick. A couple of governments didn't follow through somewhere, but it's presumptuous, I think, to say that the people in LSDs aren't represented. We're just talking about basic services, and in most LSDs, it's garbage collection, solid waste, recycling, and that's what they're concerned with. And if it's happening, and it's happening well, they're not fussed. Anyway.
Very good.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lee. I appreciate that. We're just closing in on time, but before we wrap things up, I'd like to ask Minister Alain to come back to the screen and make some final remarks. Minister.
Thank you, Chad, and thank you everyone for the great discussions tonight. This has been a great exercise, and I think to Mr. Gru's point, we'll definitely come back, I think, with some narrower opportunities, could be some economic modeling, as we discussed, I think last night or Tuesday. We had a very good discussion. We have to hone in on where we want to go now that we've had a great chat, people giving their ideas. As Ryan indicated, we have many people that are also submitting some great documentation on where we should go. So thank you everyone for that. I just want to reiterate that the status quo is not an option. It's time that we reform. We've been talking about for 20 years. We are existing. We exist in a structure that's been there for over 60 years. We want to bring democracy to 30% of the population in New Brunswick, which want to have a say on their quality of life. So that's really important. I think Mr. Reid, I think, and Mr. Lee Reid said it the best, that people are comfortable in what they have. However, I just want to make sure that they have the ability to vote. And it's really important that people have the ability to vote to say have a quality of life. Because in pre-1967, they had the ability to vote. So we had county governments. However, we want to move forward in 2021, and it's about time. We want to keep rural. There are some urban practices which have creeped up in rural New Brunswick, which is not really conducive, as I think Lois Corbett said earlier today, on sustainable planning for our environment. There's the LSD of the Moncton Parish with 10,000 people. An individual has just built an apple orchard, have invested a significant amount of money. On the other side, there's a farm with some cows, and there's probably couple of hundred houses, $400,000 and up, and I could start. Guy Gou and I could start an oil factory, and nobody could stop us. So, hence the reason why land planning is so important. It is, like I said on Tuesday night, the 3 F's. We got to make sure that forestry, farming, fisheries are taken care of. That's what built New Brunswick. How do we build it for the 21st century? We need access to internet. We need good roads, and I think that's what planning is all about. Regional collaboration is definitely being discussed today, and it's something important for us. And we need to make sure that we have sustainable services, because if we don't move forward on regional collaboration and we don't move forward on our 4 pillars, we'll lose services, we'll lose infrastructure, but the worst is we'll lose economic development opportunities. So we have to find that l'équilibre, that balance between economic development, good planning, and making sure we have the right tools. And we make a statement for our kids, the next generation, how we want this land used, developed, and make sure we leave it in a better way that we want. So thank you for this exercise. Again, not everybody's expectations will be met with this reform. There's going to be some people that said maybe we didn't go far enough. We didn't solve all the problems of New Brunswick. But again, it's important that we move forward. We get this file. I think it's supported for New Brunswickers. It's a file that it's been talked enough. And again, I truly want to thank you for your time tonight. And again, we've got some great ideas and we can move forward. Also, a shout out to MLAs and Minister Gary Crossman from Hampton for being here tonight, and MLA Keisha Sanfontakadi also, and my colleagues from the Legislative Assembly. And to all of you, thank you. Have a good night. And I'm going to stay. Go Habs, go.
Great. Thank you, Minister. That brings us to the end of the evening. I want to take the opportunity to thank everybody for their participation, their civility, their ideas and engagement. We've done 4 of these this week. So on behalf of Maurice Robichaud, who helped us with moderation and the other 2 Francophone sessions, we'd like to thank everybody for taking the time and participating. Don't forget, you can still send your comments in to gnb.ca/vibrantnb or email vibrantnbdynamic@gnb.ca. We'll be looking forward to taking your briefs, and go out and enjoy the lovely evening, and we'll look forward to seeing you again. Take care, everybody.
Great job tonight, man.
Thank you.